So, good afternoon, everybody, and thanks for joining us today. If you haven't been with us in our lives before, if you're new to us today, I'm Laura Hunter, owner of Drop the Leash Dog Training, and I'm here today with Celeste Gagnon, who teaches classes with me at Drop the Leash. So today, this is going to be fun. Today we're talking about dogs and children. And we were a little bit late starting because we were already discussing this backstage. And so, we're both coming from different backgrounds on this a little bit. We both work with dogs and we work with kids in our programs. But I don't remember my dogs and my son, because that was many, many years ago, long before I was a dog trainer. But Celeste, you're coming at this more as a parent than I am. So we've already discussed, we have some different perceptions about this throughout the session. And, we always ask people to, if you have any questions, certainly weigh in with us, put those questions in the chat. But also, if you have any experiences, if you have a dog and you have kids and you've got some experiences as we go through everything we want to talk about today, please feel free to add your comments and weigh in on what your experiences have been with kids and dogs. So having said that, we'll get started. I am a dog trainer, and I do have, I feel a good education in dog training and behavior. I will, however, admit right up front that this is not my area of specialty or expertise, specifically working with kids and dogs. If anybody is looking for in-depth or specific behavior, I would like to refer everybody over to an organization called Family Paws, and that's run by a woman named Jennifer Dryock, and she is quite an expert in dealing with toddlers, babies, children, and dogs. What I'll do is I'll post her Facebook page link, and I will post the link to her website in the comments when we're finished today, because she has tons of great resources for people. She's got webinars available and just tons and tons of information. And she also did a podcast with one of my mentors, Michael Shikashio, and that was really good, a quick one for everybody to listen to. So I will post that as well. And so lots of resources for you today. So the information that I am putting forth here today is a mixture of what I've learned from listening to Jennifer over, the past year or so since I discovered her, as well as my own personal experience as a trainer with dog families. I know we talked in our live last week about online learning. And I'm not going to go over it again, but the interesting thing about online learning is that, of course, we switched over when we went to when COVID hit. And our format's a little bit unique in that we do a lot of our activities are on video, but we also have live Zooms every week. And in the live Zooms, what we do is we answer questions from parents. We talk about issues people are having with their new puppies. I'm actually specifically talking about our puppy program. And since June, we have had 90 puppies go through that puppy program. So I have been able to have an awful lot of conversations with clients about their dogs, the specific issues, but also about dog training and dog behavior in general. So those conversations, where Celeste and I talked about this, we were never able to have those conversations in live classes. And those conversations have been a huge learning curve for me, because I've discovered that there are an awful lot of new dog owners and even, experienced dog owners out there in the world who don't have a really in-depth knowledge of what actually dogs are and why dogs do what they do and what influences our dog's behavior. And that is not, of course, any reflection on dog owners, but more, I think, a reflection on our industry, because most of our live classes, most dog trainers, when people come to classes, teach skills. We teach behaviors and skills: sit, down, stay. But we don't always take the time to educate our clients about what dogs do and why they do it, and how their behaviors are influenced. So we usually leave all that type of discussion for when the behavioral issues crop up, which is a case of us being more reactive instead of proactive. So I certainly know that in the future, I am certainly going to be including a lot of information for my clients about dog behavior, because I think if people understand why dogs do what they do, the rest of it just falls into place. So, certainly since COVID hit, families, kids and dogs are spending a lot more time together. And so I know that I've gotten a lot more, I've gotten many more phone calls over the past several months about dogs and kids. People are calling me saying, "Oh my goodness, my dog's growling at the children. My dog nipped my child the other day. Are they aggressive? Oh goodness grief, what do we do? Do we have to give up our dog?" I'm happy to say that in most cases, it has not been a serious issue. And in many of the situations that have come up, we've been able to explain why it happened, and how to resolve it just by changing the nature of the interactions between the kids and the dogs. So today I thought, let's talk about that important knowledge that we feel parents need to have about their dogs, so that they can be proactive and prevent these issues from cropping up with our dogs and our kids. And I think the first thing that we need to talk about, I have many points that we need to talk about today. So we're going to talk about, the whys and the wherefores, and then we will give you some practical tips for sure on how to manage your dog-children interactions so that you have a more harmonious household. And Celeste, you're going to jump in at any point and ring me in on this.
With my 2 cents.
The gloom and doom of Laura. So I will admit right up front, we were just talking about this, that I do have a bias as a dog trainer, and I have a bias as a trainer who has taken many, many courses in fear and aggression in dogs. So my bias is probably a little bit of overmanagement with kids and dogs, but and Celeste has definitely a more moderate approach than mine. So this will come up in the next little while in this conversation. But let's just address a couple of general issues that I think could clear up a lot of problems. So I think the first thing that everybody needs to do is to be realistic about the relationships between our kids and our dogs, and just our relationships with our dogs as well. And I think that all of us have, including me, including dog trainers, we have this picture in our head about the ideal relationship, that what we want life to look like with our dog. And I think, unfortunately, that picture that we have is often influenced by books we read, by movies we watch, God knows the Disney idea of what dogs are, and just the general stuff we see on the internet. I was thinking about that, and I remember when I was a kid that, for a couple of years there, I hope I wasn't too old, I did have an imaginary Lassie. And Lassie went everywhere with me, and Lassie was the absolute perfect dog. Absolutely didn't need to be trained, was my best friend, totally loyal, and knew exactly what I was thinking, and was just everything. Now that I have 3 Australian Shepherds, I still fantasize about owning a Lassie, but now I'm rooted in reality. So, dogs are often referred to as a man's best friend, and I think we filter that idea down to our kids as well, in that we would like the dogs to be our kids' best friend and have them grow up together. And it is certainly achievable and it's doable as long as we're realistic about it.
Yeah.
So I hear a lot of common phrases like, "Oh my God, they're just going to be best friends. They're going to grow up together and they're going to teach each other how to do that." Or we totally know that our dog will take care of our child. They'll let me know if anything happens, and I completely trust my dog to be there watching over the kids. Those are pretty big expectations for a dog. And it's not to say that you can't successfully integrate your kids and your dogs, but I think we just need to have a clearer, more realistic picture about what that would look like. And Celeste and I are both, once I get through these general points, we will both talk about what we think that could look like and offer some suggestions. I think, secondly, we without knowledge of how dogs perceive and process the world, I think there's a tendency for people to look at dog behavior through a human lens because that's the only lens that we have. So once again, that goes back to, those of us dog professionals, we need to get more information out to people so that they do have a more realistic picture. It's so easy to interpret dog body language and dog behavior from our own perspective. It's anthropomorphic. I can never get that word out. And it's something that we commonly do. And I was listening again to the podcast with Jennifer Shryock this morning, talking to Michael Shikashio, and she had an example of that was not for, well, I sort of familiar to me, but not totally, in that, and I've seen it on YouTube, and I've heard people talking about it, is, if you bring home a new baby, or, your baby's been home for a while and the dog is there with you, and people often see the dogs licking the baby and think, well, that's really great. The dog already loves the baby. They're trying to give the baby a kiss. We stop to question whether there could be another reason for that behavior. And Jennifer Shryock talks about licking as actually a kiss to dismiss. So that was the first time I'd heard that. But she describes it as a behavior that the dog can be offering or presenting with the goal of actually increasing the distance between themselves and the baby. So something that simple can be so easily misinterpreted. And if you're looking for more detailed information on that, she's got information on her sites about that. Another really common example is the dog wagging its tail when it sees the baby. Owners tend to think, a lot of people tend to think, they see a dog wagging its tail, that a dog is really happy. So, the dog's really happy to be with the baby, the toddler, if it's older, the child. But most trainers will tell you that a wagging tail is not always a positive thing. If it's a stiff wagging tail, it's often an indication of stress or fear. So, owners need to be able to recognize dog body language, some simple, you don't have to get in depth, but simple dog body language, and specifically stress signals. And it's sometimes it can be tough because, if you go through the common stress signals, I'll give you some examples. Yawning is a common stress signal. But taken in a different context, your dog could be yawning because they're tired. But in a stressful context, that is a stress signal. Lip licking. That's another stress signal. But I have a dog who lip licks at other times when she is not stressed. So again, you have to take it in the context. But there are some fairly recognizable common ones. If your dog has a stiff body, if their ears are down and back, if the mouth is closed. I know a closed mouth is a big one with my dogs. If I see them walking along, or if I'm around them and their mouths are closed, I usually stop to sort of figure out what's going on. If you see if a dog averts its head, or if they give you what's called whale eye, which is where you see the whites of their eyes, all of those are stress signals. And you can see individual stress signals. You can see them, offered, a couple of them offered, in that one moment. I think any dog any dog owner, you don't even have to have, necessarily be a parent as well. Every dog owner should be able to recognize stress signals in dogs. So what I will do as well is I'll put some links up again in the comment section to resources where you can actually go and look at dog body language and get some information about that, because it's not hard to pick it up, but you just need to have a good resource on that.
Laura.
Yeah.
We should also maybe put some photos that we find on the internet of kids and dogs. The ones that make you and I cringe all the time.
Well, I was just going to say, I want to practice recognizing dog signals, like those signals in dogs. I don't know what everybody else sees on their Facebook page, but I have videos going past my Facebook feed. You probably do too, Celeste, because you and I are so into dogs out there on Facebook. And they're terrifying to us. It's all those videos of, I don't know what they call them. I'm not going to mention the site. There's one site that's really common for them. But dogs, here's my baby growing up with my dogs. Here's my child with this great relationship with this dog. And I watched one this morning, and it was like a really tiny baby with two large dogs. And I used to look at those and just have a meltdown because it's like watching a car accident. My first inclination is to do this. Now what I do is I just practice counting all the stress signals the dogs in those videos throw at me before the video ends.
Yeah.
So once you start to recognize or you gain a little knowledge about that dog body language, it's so noticeable when you're watching those videos that the dogs are trying so hard to tell somebody that they are not comfortable with that baby sleeping on the side of their face, or the baby lying on the back. And what's even more frightening to me is all of the comments that go along with those videos, where everybody goes, "Oh my God, that's just the cutest thing I've ever seen." Whereas if you're a dog trainer, you're terrified.
It's a different perspective, but I would agree. I mean, you see the photos of kids and dogs all the time, and the dogs often have the whale eye, and people think it's adorable because it looks like a cartoon character. Exactly. That whale eye is telling you that, this side eye look, that I'm not happy with this scenario, kind of thing.
I know. And we hear a lot in dog training world, "Oh my God, they just bit out of the blue. The dog just attacked out of the blue." Very rarely do dogs just attack out of the blue. Usually dogs are really throwing a lot of stress signals, a lot of communication at people to let them know they're uncomfortable. And, I think that, you've got to give dogs a lot of credit for self-control, because I look at those videos and I think, "Oh my God, why aren't these dogs?" At the end of the video, I just want to go say to the dog, "Thank you for not eating that baby." Because that was incredible self-control on your part. So, thank God dogs have that ability to, I don't know what you call it, just
tolerate us.
Yes, thank you very much. Yeah, exactly. And so that leads into my next point, which is we all need to develop more empathy for the dogs. And by empathy, I'm not talking about sympathy, although we are sympathetic to dogs in those positions, but in those situations. But we need to be able to see the situation from the dog's perspective. And that is super tough. One of my big heroes in life is Temple Grandin. I don't know how many people watching have ever heard of Temple Grandin. Temple Grandin is a woman who has autism. She also has a PhD, and she's written several books about. She wrote a really fantastic book, Animals in Translation, but she is also very well known in the animal world. She's like a rock star in the cattle industry because she redesigns stockyards all over the world to make it more less stressful for cattle when of course they're going into a really stressful situation, which is they're being turned into hamburgers, but just to try and reduce the animal's stress in those situations. And that was the first time I'd ever actually thought about, what it takes to see something from the perspective of another being or another animal. She taught me a lot about that. And so we do need to see, it's almost impossible for us to be completely successful at this, but we do need to try to see the situation from the dog's perspective. When people bring a new baby home, your dog probably isn't going to understand that they should feel the same. You want them to feel the same way you do. Immediately recognize this as a member of our family and something that we should love and keep safe. I cannot begin to say what a dog sees when a new baby comes home, but to me, maybe they're seeing just this weird little creature making odd noises and moving in a strange way. We don't know. But the chances are pretty good they're not seeing what we see, and they're not feeling about it the same way we do. Babies, and I got a lot of this perspective is from Jennifer again. Babies do move in strange ways. If you're a dog, they have dogs. The one big thing that dogs have difficulty with is unpredictability. Dogs like predictability. Things that are sudden, things that are unpredictable, we know dogs have issues with. Things that are novel, dogs can often have issues with novelty, unpredictability. If there is something a baby certainly is, it's novel and it's unpredictable. Even tiny babies move around, they flap they kick their feet, they flap their arms. Babies who are crawling are unpredictable for a dog. Walking toddlers are unpredictable for dogs. They move, babies, toddlers, newborns move in unpredictable ways, and they make odd noises. So, I think that's really tough for dogs to deal with. And certainly babies who are crawling, toddlers who are moving, if they're really excited about a dog in the room, they're coming straight at that dog, so dogs see this weird little unpredictable creature coming towards them. I think that's hard for dogs to deal with. And, dogs are predators, and babies cry. And I am not totally sure of the research out there on if there is research or, if anybody's looked into the fact, dogs are predators. They are genetically encoded as predators when they live in the wild to hunt the weak and the helpless. So, is a baby crying? Can it trigger that predation sequence in a dog? And I'm not talking about aggression. The predatory sequence is food acquisition. It's not aggression in a dog. I do know, though, that I had a really impactful experience once a couple of years ago, in that I was over at the dog park in Aurora. There's a huge, huge dog park there. Tons and tons of dogs. A lot of big dogs tend to go there, maybe because there's more space. And I was working with Maddie, not in the park, but I was up above the park on the sidewalk. The park was down in a hollow. And I was just working with her on some training. But I had a really good view of the whole park. And a man came into the park with his dogs, and he also brought his toddler with him. And he wasn't really paying attention to the little boy. The little boy let go of his hand and wandered off a few feet. And then the little boy tripped and fell down, and he started to cry. And every dog in that dog park, I swear to God, every dog in that dog park stopped and turned around and looked at that little boy on the ground. And all I could think was, oh, buddy, pick your child up now. But it was quite dramatic, and it was quite obvious that cry of that crying child did attract the attention of every dog in that park. And all of them became very still watching that toddler. So, it was a scary moment.
Yeah.
For sure.
I think most dog parks don't even allow you to bring your children in.
No.
Probably for that reason.
Yeah, but we also know that dog parks are notorious for people breaking rules.
Yeah, exactly.
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 It was a good learning experience that I can now recount in a Facebook Live. It worked out okay. And I'm not trying to scare people, but I really do think that we need to think about what dogs see when they are with children who, not even necessarily children that they're familiar with in their home, but children who are coming into the home, the dog might not know, or children that they encounter out in the world. The other big aha moment for me, even though I am, as I say, biased about, being really careful about around kids and dogs, I was listening to another podcast that Michael Shikashio did with a man named Jim Crosby, and Jim Crosby has his master's in veterinary forensic medicine. Anyway, his job is to go travel. He travels quite a bit. He's been all over the world investigating dog attacks and dog bites and dog fatalities in children. And again, this is, we can never be in the mind of a dog, but Jim had a really interesting description of what he thought dogs could possibly see when a toddler or a young child is approaching. And, toddlers and kids, they're really excited about going up to dogs and petting them. So usually, they've got a big smile on their face and they've got their arms opened out. So you and I both know, and we've talked about this in other Facebook Lives, is that reach is a big thing for dogs. I know with my dog Rosie, who's very well adjusted, if you reach out towards her, she will back away or even drop to the ground. So, that can be kind of scary. But so we knew about that one. But what he also added is that, young children, toddlers are eye to eye, so they're right on eye level with dogs. And, humans are comfortable approaching with eye contact. Dogs, not so much. Dogs want to avert from that eye contact. And if the children are happy and they're laughing, the other things that's happening is their mouths are open. So not only is your dog seeing something coming at them face to face with that, assertive arms open, they're also seeing potentially something that is showing teeth as well. How accurate that is, I don't know. Jim Crosby is much more knowledgeable than I am, and he did put it out there, but it does give you pause for thought as to what your dog sees, whereas what we see is, oh my God, this child loves this dog, and all of this, the dog's going to be great with the child coming up to them and petting them and giving them a big hug. And, the dog could have the complete opposite, reaction to all of that. So I think it's super important that we try to look at everything from as much of the dog's perspective as we can, I don't know.
No, I agree. But I think that's also something that people who don't have children or people who don't have dogs and just have children should teach
Yes.
also, because I don't know how many times I've gone for walks and kids want to run up and play with the dogs. And it's just like, you are not approaching properly at all.
No, that's huge. Yes.
And I mean, they don't have a dog, so they're extra excited to play with the dog.
Yes.
So it's like, I think this is just like a life skill that everybody should have.
Yeah.
Either learn it or don't go near, right?
Yes, and I know, I think my dogs are good. You know, I trust them as much as I trust any dogs. Certainly when they were young, they worked in our, you know, we ran programs for kids with disabilities, and kids with disabilities can have unpredictable communication styles and body language. And I know my dogs were pretty good working with our kids, but, you know, we were very strict about the interactions, and even to this day, if I see somebody running towards my dogs, my first inclination is just to do a turn and go.
Yeah.
You know, and we've taught a lot of our clients to do that as well, because, you know, we got all these big, cute golden retrievers out there,
Mhm.
and you know, even if these big golden retrievers have the best intentions in the world, the chances of them knocking those kids flat on the ground is probably pretty good too, which would scare the kids. So, you know, just think about you know, it's important for people to, you know, as you said, everybody to think about that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, there's a lot of traffic all of a sudden.
No, that's okay. That's okay.
Dogs are full alert. Yeah.
So, you know, as I said, we're not trying to scare people. We're just trying to give people pause for thought, and, you know, think about you know, what is happening, you know, between your child and your dog, you know. So I guess what we need to do now is talk about what do you do, as opposed to, well, those are all things that you do proactively, but how do you actually keep everybody safe in the moment? And I know that my biggest priority would be for young, like new babies and toddlers, management, tons of management. You know, and this is where I think lots of people can have different perspectives as to what should happen, and this is where my bias, of course, sits as opposed to your thoughts, Celeste, which are a little bit more moderate. You know, I certainly think that your baby and your newborn don't really have to meet and interact. You know, that I think that in a lot of situations, dogs and kids, dogs and toddlers, even older kids, can share space safely and happily apart. I think it's a great idea if you've got a new baby in the house, or if you've got a baby who's crawling, you know, management, and I'm talking about gates, crates, and leashes, are certainly the safest way to go. And I think that, how can I say this? I think that they can also give parents a bit of relief, because the one thing that you and I do agree on is that if you have a dog and a baby, and you're not using management, that you have to be 100% there in the moment, supervising and you know, making sure that everything is going okay. You have to be 100% there mentally, for sure. And, you know, you've got new parents who are tired and who are not on their best in terms of their mental faculties. We should ask Scott, actually.
I was going to say, I don't know anybody like that.
Yeah. Sorry, I meant to mention this at the beginning, but we should dedicate this Facebook Live to Scott. Scott's our social media guru and our tech expert. He's behind the scenes at the moment, hopefully trying to stay awake because he became a dad 4 days ago. So he had a new daughter, Jordan Olivia, and he looked a little fatigued. When he showed up before we started the live. So let's dedicate this session to him. But I was looking at him thinking, yeah, how many new parents are really on the ball at this point? So management is great. And, if you've got a dog who's not totally sure about that new baby, as a trainer, I would be inclined to have the baby on one side of a barrier and the dog on the other side, or at least some sort of division. And to me, it's the perfect time to provide your dog with something absolutely wonderful that they can just attend to by themselves, like a stuffed Kong or a really great bone, so that your dog is learning that they don't have to be involved in whatever you're doing, actively involved in whatever you're doing with the baby, but also that being with the baby predicts really great stuff, which is a great way to classically condition your dog to love babies. Yeah. And that they can be calm, and definitely, if I think that, well, I'm kind of getting ahead of myself, but I think that all dogs and kids, one of the biggest learning experiences, one of the best learning experiences for all dogs and kids is learning to be calm around each other. I know that I often hear from parents about their kids playing with the dogs, and we've even seen it out on the agility field in the puppy play groups. Is that kids love to run, dogs love to run. They would love to run together. And just let that energy loose and let it go, but it's not always the best situation, because neither dogs nor young dogs or young children are really good at putting a cap on their impulse control. It's very easy for them all to get overexcited, and things just spiral out of control from there. And I'm not talking about dogs being aggressive. I'm just talking about dogs knocking children down in general because everybody's so excited, and dogs jumping on kids. So I think one of the best things that you can do is teach your dog to be calm, teach your kids to be calm, and teach them both that hanging out in the same space isn't such a big deal. They can both do their own thing, or they can interact, in a supervised way. But I don't know, Celeste, you had kids, and I think knowing you and knowing your kids, that's probably exactly what you did.
Yeah, I think that teaching your kids respect for the animal, because you're not dealing with another person. This is a whole other species. So respecting it as its own individual, the calm and boundaries is key for me, even now. Actually, for grown-ups too.
I know.
If we're gonna go there.
Yeah, I know. And I have had people call me about children issues with their kids, and their children were like in late teens. So yeah, it is always. And I guess also, if you take the time to understand where your dog is at, what their stress signals look like, how to read their body language, how to understand when they're feeling okay. I guess also another thing that you should think about is your own comfort level as a parent. Like, you have to be totally comfortable and confident that your dog's in a good place as regards your child, and that that yeah, that's the big one. So that might look different for every parent. We've already discovered in the few minutes we were talking before we went on the live, we were sort of looking at a scenario of having your dog in there with your child, and what would that look like to you and what would that look like to me? And we both have very different comfort levels. So my comfort level is dog on one side, child on the other. I'm good with that. Let's hang out together. Whereas you were a bit more adventuresome than I am. Maybe not as much of a bias there.
Yeah, I think, well, I mean, part of it was not knowing about the risks necessarily, because this was way before I started getting into properly training. But also, I think, it's a parenting style, but it's also, different dogs have different personalities, different types of breeds of dogs have different personalities.
Yes.
Would I behave the same way with my kids as babies and toddlers with a shepherd that I did with a golden? Maybe not, especially one with anxiety, right? Like, I would respect that she would probably need a break more often than my golden did. She would need a safe timeout space for herself or the kids more often than the golden did. The type of play would have been different probably. I mean, there's a comment here that somebody put in about dogs who feel the need to be protective of a child in certain environments, in certain scenarios. So, I mean, knowing that your dog behaves a certain way in certain things, and certain things will set some anxiety off in that dog, saying, I need to jump in there and do something, so knowing what triggers your pet with different children and different energy levels. I mean, this is all a way for you to judge what will work for you in your house and what won't.
Yes. And again, you're right. There is a difference in every dog is different. You and I both started out in dog world owning Goldens. And, like really. And now we own
starter dog.
Yeah, well, between us, we own 5 herding dogs. So we know that there's a massive difference. And I've got Australian Shepherds who, sometimes have proximity issues and body handling issues. One of the big factors in all of this is that your dog, certainly your baby or your toddler, don't understand safety. They're going to think that heading off into your dog's face is a fabulous thing. They're not going to understand that. But definitely your dog has to feel safe. You and your dog both have to feel safe. And your dog has to always have the choice of getting up and leaving.
That's it right there.
Yeah, and that's that's the golden rule that we teach all of our puppy people, is that whenever your dog isn't feel safe, it is their option to leave the situation. So definitely you don't want to push your dog. Oh no, just hang out with the baby. You'll grow to love the baby. It'll be great. That's probably the least effective thing you can do. In fact, I almost think it's a good thing if both your child and your dog can learn to disengage from each other, because I know that children can easily get obsessed with dogs and puppies, but they're too young to understand that a new dog in a new different situation might not react the same way their dog does at home. And I've always wanted my dogs to be able to disengage from triggers and distractions out in the world and be calm and focus back on me, or, go on, if it's a case of a baby in the house, disengage from the child. You don't need to be here. Maybe you're doing something with your child, you're playing with them. You don't always need to be here as the dog. So, mat work is great. Go lie down on your mat. Here's a stuffed Kong, go and be calm. They don't always have to be together. They don't always have to be actively engaged with each other.
Well, and I think that's the big one too. It's like our discussion earlier before we went online was about the kids hanging out with the dog and being in the same room together playing or whatever. When should that be? How is that okay for in some situations, and maybe it's not so okay in others? My kids have always been taught to, they could be in a room and they can be playing and doing their thing, and the dog can be right there beside them doing their thing, and that's good. That's fine.
Yeah.
They don't have to be in each other's face, but they're side by side playing. You know, maybe Meadow is chewing on her nylabone, happily chewing on her nylabone, while Emily was coloring or something. Like, so they were always growing up together and respecting each other's space and hanging out together, but not necessarily actively engaged is the perfect sentence.
Yes, and I'll bet that you spend a lot of time creating that experience for them.
Yes.
Yeah, it just doesn't happen.
Yeah, because what's fun for one species isn't fun for the other. So I mean, you know, you're not going to expect your dog to sit and color in a coloring book because they're a dog. So give them something to do that they want to do while your child is doing something they want to do, and they can do it together.
Yes. Yes.
And it's calm and it's pleasant, and they're hanging out and they're growing up together and being friends without actually being annoying to each other.
Exactly.
You know? And I'm thinking right now, at the beginning, you said something about, you know, during COVID, you have this scenario where everybody's stuck together already. There is no getting away from anybody right now. I mean, I haven't had a day to myself in a year almost at this point. I mean, really. So you have to wonder about how the dogs feel, you know, especially dogs who were pre-COVID, and all of a sudden the kids are home full time, and you know, and the kids are bored or lonely and they want to hang out and play with the dog, and the dog's just like, I'm not used to all of this attention, like, enough.
Yes. And so from a practical point of view, we know that dogs are, I'm going to throw out my weird word again, crepuscular, which means that they are genetically evolved to sleep during the day. And most of our dogs, you know, when we all went off to work and school, it works out really well because the dogs just sleep all day. My dogs sleep all day, you know, and so dogs do need to have that alone time in that space. So, you know, as a parent, your children, you know, when they're at an age where you can start teaching it, they have to learn to respect the dog's alone time. And until they're ready to do that, you have to create the dog's alone time with management. So, you know, if your dog is in a crate, your children should not be poking into the crate. I was listening to a podcast the other day, and the woman used to put a little Post-it note on the crate saying out of bounds, or, you know, alone time, or, you know, stay away from this crate, you know, time out. And you know, if they're not in a crate, give them a room or a safe place in the house where they can just go and lie down and have a Kong and fall asleep. So you have to create that time for your dog in the house, for sure. For sure. You're going to have a very stressed out, overtired dog, and then they're going to start to trigger stack and get cranky. You know, so definitely. And, you know, if your kids want to get to the age where they can start to interact more actively with the dogs, you know, we know through the Games That Train program that the kids can learn. They can learn positive ways to interact with the dog other than running and having the dogs chase them. I'm not a big fan of that for many reasons, but we've taught a lot of kids in the program to play the orientation game, or play Find It with the dogs, where they're throwing the food out on the floor and the dogs get to chase the food, which is a great activity for dogs. It's a good job for them. It's also a good job for the kids. You know, I have families where the kids go out in the in the good weather, and that's their job in the morning, which is to throw food for the dogs, throw the dogs breakfast out there in the back lawn and let the dogs eat it, because we're big fans of, you know, scatter feeding. There's so many things that your kids can learn to do interactively with dogs, where they can be safe, and they can learn to train sitting down, and, you know, other activities like that. You know, that's when you can start to encourage that kind of stuff. However, since we're sort of moved on to older children, one of my big worries is putting too much responsibility on kids before they're ready to take it on. And I've seen that in some of our programs, and I've talked to parents who said, well, the kids need to be able to walk the dogs. And to me, that's a scary one. Because most dogs can outpull most children. And even if the dogs aren't out pulling the children, even if they're small dogs, you have no idea what can happen out in the world. And this is, you and I talking about Walks at Work, the reactive dog program, where that you can be walking your dog and, somebody else is bound to show up who doesn't have their dog on a leash. So, the dog runs up to the other dog, to the dog that your child has, and what happens then. So, encourage your kids to do simple activities with the dogs in the house under your supervision, but don't give them so much responsibility that's going to create anxiety in them. I know when we did the program, when we did our programs with our kids and they wanted to walk the dogs, we thought that was a great idea, but we always double leashed the dogs. So, the kids were great. They had the leash. I know that's a big fun thing for kids, is to take that leash. But we always made sure we had physical backup on that one. So there's nothing wrong with doing that. And that way
that's what I did too.
Yeah, it's fun for the kids, and yet they're safe if anything happens, So, some of this it's not common sense, but it's just making sure that you always feel comfortable with what your kids and your dogs are doing. Go out and educate yourself on how your dog is communicating with you and what body language is saying to you, so that you can look at your dog and say, yes, my dog is comfortable, or no, my dog isn't comfortable. Maybe we need to immediately change the situation so that you're comfortable as well. I think most parents have pretty good instincts about comfort levels. And I think probably, I don't know if most parents err on the side of caution or not. I think if you have more knowledge about dogs and can read body language, I think, you're in a good spot. And then, keep the expectations down. If your kids and your dogs are going to develop a great relationship, it's not going to be a relationship that's forced or that's over the top in terms of interactions. I think it's just something that has to grow organically.
Yes, I agree.
But definitely, with the younger ones, with the babies, with the little ones who are crawling, I think erring on the side of caution is a good thing there. But that's my bias.
No, I agree with you. I think that, because once they start crawling, you're removing some of that choice option from dogs, because a toddler won't say, oh, the dog doesn't want me to do this, because toddlers don't think that way yet. So I think, in that scenario, you need more management. Because I think that dog's choice is so important.
Yes.
To all of this.
Yes. So huge management in the beginning, and huge levels of supervision, active supervision, 100% supervision. But I think supervision should go right up to way past toddlerhood as well, because kids are kids, and even teenagers do dumb things with dogs. I know, because I had one and he did dumb things with my dogs. Well, we won't go there. So like always, even when your kids are just kids, like how old are your kids now?
14 and 11. They're good.
Well, your children are more mature than most 30-year-olds, so but like I've met your kids. But like, at what age were you comfortable not supervising?
I honestly, if I'm not around, the dogs are usually in their crates.
Well, there you go.
Yeah,
there you go.
And it's not that I don't trust. It's not that I don't trust either groups, the dogs or the kids.
Yeah.
But anything can happen.
Yes.
And I don't want the kids to have to deal with a scenario that they can't deal with,
Yes.
that
Yes.
they're not prepared for.
Yes.
So the dogs are just locked up, so everybody's happy and everybody's relaxed.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. You know, dogs can, you're right, dogs can do dopey things. You know, if you've got more than one dog in a house, you know, there could be
Yeah.
less than positive interactions. You know, even as good as my dogs are, you know, even Annie and Rosie, you know, best friends can get into a spat occasionally.
Yeah.
How would I expect a child to deal with that? You
Exactly.
know, the dog can pick up something and eat something they're not supposed to. You know,
Yeah.
there's so many scenarios because dogs don't mature as much as children do. So, you know, even
Well,
if
and
you're
there's
more
just,
mature,
you can't predict everything.
no, you can't at all.
Like there might be an environmental thing that happens, that like the fire alarm goes off and it's
Yes.
not a fire, but the noise sets off the dogs, and then what, right? Then
Yes.
the kids have to deal with that.
Yes, exactly.
So,
Exactly.
no.
Yeah. So, you know, I think we really are on the same page.
We are.
I'm a little more paranoid than you are, just a different perspective. But, you know, definitely lots of management in the beginning and supervision and until your children, you know, get jobs and move out of the house. Pretty much.
And they get their own dogs and it's not your problem.
That's right. You know, I always, when we had our dogs, you know, we had kids, you know, Brett and I have kids, so they're long gone and grown up. But our expectations were the kids were there, but really the dogs were our responsibility. And you know, we didn't get into this thing where, you know, kids have to walk the dogs every day. God knows dogs would never have been walked. You know, it was basically our responsibility first. And if the kids wanted to be, and, you know, take the dogs for a walk as they were older, if they wanted to do something with the dogs, that was fine. But there wasn't the pressure on everybody to just, you know, kids have to do everything, you know. Really, the dogs are ours.
That's an unrealistic expectation right there.
Yes. Exactly.
Really.
Yeah. So, you know, if you have any questions, or if you want to put anything in the comments, everybody, please do. I will put up a bunch of resources, definitely all of Jennifer's sites and Michael's podcast, and I'll put up some information again on body language and some sites to go to. There's some good stuff out there, and hopefully, you know, if you have any specific questions about specific issues, you know, everybody's, you know, you can always phone and consult me or consult another dog trainer about it. You know, if you're not sure, it's always best to talk to a professional, you know, in the long run, because it is dogs and kids and safety ultimately. So, you know, don't hesitate to get in touch with a dog trainer, you know, if you have some serious issues. So hopefully we'll be back with another live next week. So thank you, Celeste, for joining me on this and for talking about your life and with your dog and kids, because I didn't have a life with, I don't remember my life with dogs and kids. I have to, never mind, we won't go there. But anyway, I want to thank you and thanks everybody for joining us today. And we're not sure what our topic will be, but we'll probably be back next week with a live as well next Thursday. So hopefully everybody can join us then. Till then, everybody, the famous phrase today is stay home and stay safe. So everybody do that. Thanks, Celeste.
No problem.
Take care.